My name is Rebecca Martinez and I'm 28 years old. Standing outside this courthouse today, clutching legal papers that could destroy everything I've worked for, I never imagined my own parents would take me to court for buying a house. They claim that the Victorian cottage I saved 3 years to purchase somehow belongs to my sister Emma. The same sister who's never held a job longer than 6 months, who's drained our parents' savings account dry, and who's now sitting across from me with tears streaming down her face like she's the victim in this nightmare. But what they didn't know was that this house held a secret that would destroy our family forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and the fight for my independence, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready for a wild ride through family drama that'll make your jaw drop. Make sure to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this twisted tale unfolds. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like before everything fell apart. I worked as a senior marketing executive at Preston & Associates, one of Denver's most prestigious firms. Every morning, I'd drive my paid-off Honda Civic to my corner office on the 15th floor, where I managed million-dollar campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. I was the daughter who did everything right. Straight A's through high school, full academic scholarship to Colorado State University, graduated summa cum laude with my MBA, and climbed the corporate ladder faster than anyone expected. I was living what most people would call the American dream. Except there was one massive problem that had been eating away at my soul for 28 years. My sister Emma was the golden child, and I was invisible. 3 years younger than me, Emma had been treated like a precious princess since the day she was born. While I was studying until midnight to maintain my 4.0 GPA, Emma was getting praise for bringing home C's. When I landed my first internship at 18, Emma was getting her credit card bills paid by our parents, because art school was apparently too stressful for her delicate constitution. The pattern had been set in stone since childhood, and nothing I accomplished could break it. Emma failed out of 3 different colleges, couldn't keep a job at a coffee shop for more than 2 weeks, and had a trail of broken relationships that always ended with her crying on our parents' couch for months. But somehow, in my parents' eyes, I was the one who needed to do more for the family. Our Sunday family dinners were torture sessions disguised as wholesome tradition. Every week, I'd sit at that same dining room table, while my mother fussed over Emma's latest crisis, and my father lectured me about responsibility. Emma would show up in designer clothes that I knew she couldn't afford, talking about her newest artistic venture that would definitely take off this time, while I sat there in my business casual attire feeling like a ghost. When I mentioned getting a promotion or closing a big deal, the conversation would somehow shift back to Emma within minutes. My achievements were expected, boring, predictable. Emma's failures were dramatic, worthy of sympathy and financial support. The financial inequality between us was staggering. I'd been financially independent since college, working part-time jobs to pay for everything from textbooks to groceries. Emma, on the other hand, had never paid for anything herself. Her rent, her car payment, her insurance, her credit card bills, even her grocery money came from our parents. When I bought my first car at 22, I saved for 8 months and paid cash. When Emma wanted a car at 19, our parents co-signed for a brand new Jeep Wrangler that cost more than my annual salary at the time. The message was clear. Emma deserved to be taken care of, and I deserved to take care of myself. But the breaking point came 6 months ago at one of those dreaded Sunday dinners. I'd been looking at houses for months, carefully researching neighborhoods, getting pre-approved for mortgages, and building up my credit score. I was so excited to share my news about finally being ready to buy my first home. I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents would be proud of this milestone. Instead, my mother's first response was, "Don't you think Emma should have a stable place to live before you go buying fancy houses?" My father nodded in agreement, suggesting that maybe I should consider a duplex where Emma could live rent-free while I paid the mortgage. The idea that I should subsidize my sister's lifestyle even further made my stomach turn. Emma's reaction was even worse. She got that familiar pouty expression and said, "It must be nice to have money to throw around while some of us are struggling." The irony was suffocating. Emma was struggling because she refused to work, refused to budget, and refused to take responsibility for anything. I was successful because I worked 60-hour weeks, lived below my means, and had been saving every penny for 3 years. But in Emma's mind, my success was somehow unfair to her. She made it sound like I'd won the lottery instead of earning everything through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. That night, driving home from dinner, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to buy my house, and I wasn't going to let Emma's jealousy or my parents' favoritism stop me. I'd spent 28 years being the good daughter, the responsible one, the one who never complained about the obvious inequality. But I was done. I deserved to have something that was mine alone, something that Emma couldn't claim, something that represented all my hard work and sacrifice. I had no idea that this decision would lead to the biggest betrayal of my life. The house appeared in my real estate app on a Tuesday morning in March, and I knew immediately it was meant to be mine. A 1920s Victorian cottage in the Highland neighborhood, complete with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and enough character to make my heart skip a beat. The asking price was exactly within my budget, and the location was perfect, close enough to downtown for my commute but far enough away to feel like a peaceful retreat. I'd been looking for 8 months, and this was the first house that felt like home before I'd even seen it in person. My realtor, Patricia Hendricks, scheduled a showing for that afternoon. Patricia was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been selling houses in Denver for 20 years. She understood my budget constraints and my determination to find something perfect within my price range. Walking through that cottage for the first time was like stepping into my future. The kitchen had been recently updated with subway tile and butcher block counters. The living room had a working fireplace and built-in bookshelves that screamed cozy winter evenings. Upstairs, the master bedroom had enough space for my antique dresser and a reading nook by the window. It was everything I'd dreamed of and nothing I couldn't afford. But I made my first mistake that evening at dinner. Still floating on cloud 9 from the house viewing, I couldn't contain my excitement when I called my parents to share the news. I described every detail of the cottage, from the clawfoot tub to the original crown molding. I talked about my plans to repaint the guest bedroom, and maybe add a small garden in the backyard. For once, I thought I heard genuine interest in my mother's voice when she asked about the neighborhood and the price range. Emma was surprisingly quiet during the conversation, which should have been my first red flag. She usually had opinions about everything, but that night she just listened with an expression I couldn't read. The next morning, Patricia called me with news that made my blood run cold. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something strange happened yesterday evening. Your sister contacted me about the Highland property. She wants to schedule a viewing and asked about putting in an offer." My heart stopped. Emma didn't even have a job, let alone savings for a down payment or approval for a mortgage. When I asked Patricia how Emma had gotten her contact information, the answer made me feel sick. Emma had called the listing office, claimed to be me, and said she'd lost Patricia's business card. She'd used enough personal information about my house hunting process to convince the receptionist to give her Patricia's direct number. Driving to Patricia's office that afternoon, my hands were shaking with rage. Emma hadn't just crossed a line, she'd obliterated it. This wasn't casual sibling rivalry or her usual jealousy. This was deliberate sabotage designed to steal something I'd worked years to achieve. Patricia showed me the paperwork Emma had attempted to submit. She'd somehow convinced our parents to co-sign on a mortgage application for the exact house I wanted to buy. The application listed Emma's income as 0 and our parents as responsible for the entire mortgage payment. It was financially insane and emotionally devastating. When I confronted Emma that evening, her response was everything I'd expected and worse. She turned on the waterworks immediately, claiming I was being selfish and that she needed stability more than I did. "You already have everything going for you," she sobbed. "You have a great job in savings and perfect credit. I have nothing. Mom and Dad think I should have a chance at happiness too." The manipulation was so blatant it almost impressed me. In Emma's twisted logic, my years of hard work and responsible choices meant I didn't deserve nice things because they came too easily to me. Our parents' reaction was the final nail in the coffin of my respect for them. Instead of being horrified by Emma's behavior, They defended her. My mother actually said, "Emma is just trying to build a life for herself, and maybe this house would give her the stability she needs to get back on her feet." My father added, "You've always been the strong one, Rebecca. Emma needs more support." The implication was crystal clear. My success obligated me to step aside so Emma could have what she wanted, even though she'd done nothing to earn it, and everything to prove she didn't deserve it. But Emma's sabotage didn't stop with the house. Over the next week, I discovered she'd been spreading lies to our extended family about my greediness and how I was stealing opportunities from her. She posted cryptic messages on social media about family members who forget where they came from and people who prioritize money over love. She called my grandmother, crying about how I was being mean to her and wouldn't help her get stable housing. By the time I realized the extent of her campaign against me, half our family thought I was some kind of selfish monster who was keeping my poor sister homeless out of spite. The isolation was immediate and brutal. Cousins who'd always been friendly suddenly seemed distant when I ran into them at the grocery store. My aunt posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about family members who think they're better than everyone else. Even my grandmother, who'd always been my biggest supporter, seemed confused and disappointed when I tried to explain my side of the story. Emma had painted herself as the victim so effectively that my truth sounded like excuses. She'd turned my dream of homeownership into a family civil war, and I was losing badly. Despite Emma's manipulation campaign, I refused to back down. Working with Patricia, I submitted my offer on the Victorian cottage with a determination that surprised even me. The owners accepted my bid within 24 hours, and suddenly I was a homeowner. The closing process took 6 weeks, during which Emma's behavior escalated to levels I'd never imagined possible. She showed up at my office twice, crying hysterically and begging me to reconsider. She called my direct supervisor to report that I was having a family crisis that might affect my work performance. She even contacted my mortgage lender, claiming there were discrepancies in my application that needed investigation. Moving day arrived on a gorgeous Saturday in May, and I should have been the happiest woman in Colorado. Instead, I was loading boxes into a rental truck with help from exactly 0 family members. My parents had declined to help, citing their disappointment in my selfishness. Emma had posted a dramatic social media update about being abandoned by family that garnered dozens of sympathetic comments. My cousins, still believing Emma's victim narrative, were noticeably absent despite previous promises to help with the move. I'd hired professional movers for the heavy furniture, but carrying my life into that beautiful cottage felt hollow without the people I'd expected to share the moment with. The housewarming party I'd planned turned into a bittersweet celebration with my work colleagues. Jennifer Walsh, a family law attorney who'd become a good friend through networking events, brought champagne and enthusiasm that partially filled the void left by my family's absence. My co-workers from Preston and Associates showed up with housewarming gifts and genuine excitement for my achievement. But the empty spaces where my parents and sister should have been felt like physical wounds. I kept checking my phone, hoping for last-minute messages of support that never came. Emma's revenge campaign kicked into high gear within days of my move. Anonymous complaints started appearing at my workplace, questioning my ethics and suggesting I'd used company resources for personal gain. My supervisor, Margaret Winchester, called me into her office on a Wednesday morning looking concerned and confused. Someone had sent detailed emails claiming I'd been embezzling funds to afford my house purchase. The accusations were completely false, but they triggered an internal investigation that put my reputation and career in jeopardy. I knew immediately who was behind the attacks, but proving it was another matter entirely. The vandalism started on my second week in the house. I woke up to find my front windows covered in spray paint with messages like "thief" and "selfish sister" scrawled across the glass in dripping red letters. My beautiful wraparound porch was littered with garbage, and someone had poured motor oil across my welcome mat. The police officer who responded to my call was sympathetic, but honest about their ability to catch the perpetrator without evidence. Installing a security system became my first unplanned home expense, and the irony wasn't lost on me that I was paying to protect myself from my own family. The security cameras I'd installed proved their worth within a week. On a Thursday night around 2 in the morning, they captured clear footage of Emma and two people I didn't recognize throwing rocks at my bedroom window and spray painting obscenities on my garage door. Watching my own sister's face twisted with rage as she destroyed my property was one of the most painful experiences of my life. The Emma I'd grown up with, the one I'd protected from bullies in middle school and helped with homework for years, had been replaced by someone filled with such hatred that she was willing to commit crimes to hurt me. Confronting Emma with the video evidence led to a breakdown that was equal parts performance and genuine crisis. She sobbed uncontrollably, claiming the vandalism was a cry for help, and that I'd driven her to desperation by stealing her chance at happiness. She insisted that the house should have been hers because she needed it more, and my ability to afford it without help proved I didn't deserve it. The circular logic was maddening, but what really broke my heart was seeing how completely she believed her own lies. In Emma's mind, she was the victim of my success, and any action she took against me was justified self-defense. My parents' response to the vandalism evidence was the final proof that I'd lost them completely. Instead of being horrified by Emma's criminal behavior, they focused on what had driven her to such desperation. My mother actually asked me to consider how humiliated Emma must feel having a younger sister, who was more successful. My father suggested that maybe I could sell the house and split the proceeds with Emma to heal the family. The idea that I should reward Emma's destructive behavior by giving her exactly what she wanted made me realize that my parents and I had fundamentally different definitions of right and wrong. But in the middle of this family nightmare, something wonderful happened. Michael Torres, the contractor I'd hired to repair the vandalism damage, turned out to be exactly the kind of person I'd been missing in my life. A 32-year-old carpenter with kind eyes and steady hands, Michael listened to my story without judgment and offered support without agenda. When I apologized for the drama surrounding my house, he smiled and said, "A house worth fighting for is usually worth having." For the first time in months, I felt understood instead of criticized, supported instead of undermined. Michael became my first real ally in a war I'd never wanted to fight, and his presence in my life gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. The lawsuit papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in June, delivered by a nervous-looking process server who seemed to understand the gravity of what he was handing me. Rebecca Martinez versus Rodriguez Martinez and Patricia Martinez read the header, and seeing my own parents' names listed as plaintiffs against me felt surreal. According to the legal documents, they were claiming that I had used family money to purchase the house and that the property rightfully belonged to Emma as the family member most in need of stable housing. The allegations were so far from reality that I actually laughed out loud before the devastating implications hit me. Their attorney, a sleazy-looking man named Richard Polk, had clearly taken the case on contingency, hoping for a quick settlement that would net him a substantial fee. The lawsuit alleged that I had accessed a family savings account without permission, and that the down payment for my house came from funds intended for Emma's future. They'd fabricated documents suggesting that money I'd earned and saved over 3 years somehow belonged to the family collectively. The most painful part was reading Emma's sworn testimony, filled with lies about promises our parents had supposedly made about helping her buy a house first. Finding legal representation became my first priority, and Jennifer Walsh recommended her colleague, David Morrison, a family law specialist with 20 years of experience fighting exactly these kinds of cases. David was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair, and the demeanor of someone who'd seen every possible family dysfunction. During our first consultation, he reviewed the lawsuit documents with an expression that shifted from confusion to disgust. "This is one of the most frivolous cases I've seen in 20 years, he said flatly. "Your parents don't have a legal leg to stand on, but they can still make your life hell for months." David's investigation into my family's finances revealed truths that were both vindicating and heartbreaking. My parents weren't just playing favorites with Emma. They were financially underwater and desperate. They'd taken a second mortgage on their house to pay for Emma's various failed ventures. Their credit cards were maxed out from covering her living expenses. They had less than $2,000 in savings and were facing potential bankruptcy within 6 months. The lawsuit wasn't really about the house. It was about my parents' realization that their financial safety net was gone, and they needed someone to blame. But the most shocking discovery was Emma's gambling addiction. David's investigator uncovered bank records showing that Emma had been frequenting illegal gambling establishments for over a year. She owed money to some very dangerous people, and the amounts were staggering. $50,000 to an underground poker operation run by people who didn't accept excuses or payment plans. Her entire campaign against me wasn't just about jealousy or entitlement. She was desperate to get money before her creditors decided to collect through violence. My parents knew about the gambling debts, which explained their sudden urgency to get their hands on my house. The workplace investigation that had been triggered by Emma's anonymous complaints was finally resolved in my favor, but not before causing significant damage to my reputation and stress levels. My company's internal audit found no evidence of wrongdoing, and my supervisor Margaret actually apologized for having to put me through the process. She offered me a promotion to senior account director as compensation for the ordeal, which included a substantial raise and better benefits. But the irony wasn't lost on me that while I was succeeding professionally, my personal life was imploding in ways I'd never imagined possible. Michael had become my anchor during this period of chaos. He'd finished the vandalism repairs but continued finding excuses to check on the house and spend time with me. Our relationship evolved naturally from professional to personal, as he helped me navigate the emotional aftermath of my family's betrayal. He was the first person who understood that my success wasn't something to apologize for or share out of obligation. When I worried that my legal troubles might scare him away, he surprised me by offering to testify on my behalf about the vandalism he'd witnessed Emma commit. The financial pressure of fighting the lawsuit was enormous. David's retainer alone cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and the ongoing legal fees were draining my savings faster than I'd ever imagined. I had to take out a small personal loan to cover living expenses while dedicating most of my income to legal costs. The irony was bitter. My family was trying to claim ownership of my house while simultaneously forcing me into debt to defend my right to keep it. Emma's destructive choices weren't just affecting her anymore. They were systematically dismantling the financial security I'd worked years to build. Phone recordings that David's investigator obtained through legal discovery revealed the depth of my parents' planning and manipulation. In one particularly damning conversation, I could hear my father saying, "Rebecca's always been selfish anyway. It's time she learned that family comes first." My mother's voice responded, "If we can get that house, we can sell it and solve all our problems." They weren't trying to help Emma find stability. They were planning to use my property as their personal bailout fund. Listening to my own parents plot against me was devastating, but it also clarified something important. The people I'd been trying to please and protect had never really seen me as anything more than a resource to exploit. The case was scheduled for trial in September, giving us 3 months to build our defense and gather evidence. But Emma's gambling creditors weren't interested in waiting for legal proceedings to resolve. The threatening phone calls started in July, with voices I didn't recognize demanding payment for Emma's debts and suggesting that I might be responsible for covering her obligations. When I pointed out that I had nothing to do with Emma's gambling, the caller laughed coldly and said, "Family's family, and you're the one with money." The realization that I was now a target for Emma's dangerous choices added a layer of fear to the anger and hurt I was already carrying. David's investigation team had been working tirelessly to uncover the full extent of my family's deception, and their discoveries in late July revealed a web of lies that was far more extensive than I'd imagined. The fabricated family savings account that my parents claimed I'd stolen from had never existed. Every dollar of my down payment could be traced directly back to my own earnings and savings over the previous 3 years. David's forensic accountant had analyzed every bank transaction, every paycheck deposit, and every expense to create an unassailable timeline of my financial independence. The contrast with Emma's financial history was stark. While I had documentation for every penny I'd earned and saved, Emma's bank records showed a pattern of irresponsibility that would make any judge question her credibility. The private investigator David had hired, Sarah Chun, uncovered details about Emma's gambling operation that were both shocking and terrifying. The underground poker games weren't just casual entertainment. They were run by an organized crime network with connections throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Emma hadn't just lost money gambling. She'd been recruited as a courier for moving cash between different illegal operations. Her debt wasn't just about bad luck at cards. She'd stolen money she was supposed to deliver, and then lost it trying to win back what she'd taken. The people she owed weren't just disappointed creditors. They were criminals who viewed violence as a legitimate business strategy. Sarah's surveillance revealed that Emma had been providing my personal information to her gambling contacts, including my home address, work schedule, and car description. She told them I was wealthy and could be pressured into paying her debts to protect family honor. The betrayal was so complete that I felt physically sick reading the investigator's report. Emma hadn't just lied about me to our family. She'd endangered my safety by giving dangerous criminals detailed information about my life and routines. My own sister had essentially put a target on my back to buy herself time with people who wouldn't hesitate to hurt me. Phone records obtained through legal discovery showed that my parents had been aware of Emma's gambling problems for months before filing their lawsuit against me. They'd received multiple threatening calls from Emma's creditors, demanding payment and suggesting that family members might be held responsible for her debts. Instead of getting Emma help or reporting the threats to police, they'd decided their best option was to force me to bail them all out by giving up my house. Their lawsuit wasn't about fairness or family values. It was a desperate attempt to sacrifice my financial security to protect themselves from Emma's dangerous choices. The home invasion attempt happened on a Wednesday night in early August while I was working late at the office. My security system triggered multiple alarms as 3 men tried to break in through the back door of my house. Police response was quick enough to scare them off, but they'd left behind evidence that directly connected them to Emma's gambling operation. Fingerprints on my back door matched individuals with extensive criminal records for violence and extortion. The message was clear. Emma's creditors had decided that intimidating me might be more effective than waiting for her to find money she didn't have. Michael's response to the break-in attempt was both protective and practical. He immediately offered to stay at my house until the security situation was resolved, and he helped me install additional cameras and motion sensors throughout the property. But more importantly, he helped me process the emotional trauma of realizing that my own sister had essentially sent dangerous criminals to my home. "She's not the same person you grew up with," he said gently. "The Emma who protected you from bullies in middle school wouldn't put you in physical danger. Addiction changes people in ways that make them capable of things they'd never normally do." My neighbor, Margaret Coleman, turned out to be an unexpected ally in the fight against my family's manipulation. A retired family court judge in her 60s, Margaret had been watching the drama unfold with growing concern. She'd witnessed Emma's vandalism, seen the suspicious men watching my house, and heard enough shouting matches during my parents' visits to understand the situation. When she learned about the lawsuit, she offered to provide testimony about the harassment she'd observed and the impact Emma's behavior was having on neighborhood safety. Having a retired judge voluntarily testifying on my behalf was a powerful addition to our case. Sarah's investigation also revealed that Emma had been using my house address for various illegal activities without my knowledge. She'd applied for credit cards using my address, had packages delivered there for fraudulent online purchases, and had even listed my home as her residence on gambling operation paperwork. The implications were terrifying. If police raided the gambling network, my house could be searched as an associated property. Emma's reckless decisions weren't just threatening my emotional and financial well-being. They were potentially making me an accessory to crimes I knew nothing about. The psychological evaluation that David requested as part of our defense preparation revealed the extent of damage that years of family dysfunction had caused. The therapist, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, specialized in cases involving family manipulation and financial abuse. Her assessment confirmed that my parents' treatment of Emma and me represented classic patterns of parentification and scapegoating. Emma had been enabled into helplessness while I'd been burdened with responsibilities that weren't age-appropriate. The lawsuit was just the latest manifestation of a dynamic that had been damaging both Emma and me since childhood. But perhaps the most devastating discovery came from analyzing Emma's social media activity over the previous year. Sarah's investigation revealed that Emma had been documenting her gambling activities online, posting photos from illegal poker games, and bragging about high-stakes wins that had never actually happened. She'd been living in a fantasy world where she was a successful gambler rather than a desperate addict, and her online posts provided a timeline of her descent into dangerous territory. The evidence would be crucial for proving that Emma's claims of needing stable housing were false. What she actually needed was serious intervention for her gambling addiction and the criminal activities it had led her into. Armed with overwhelming evidence of Emma's criminal behavior and my parents' manipulation, David and I launched a comprehensive legal counteroffensive in early August. We filed restraining orders against Emma and her gambling associates, prohibiting them from coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. We also filed a civil suit against my parents for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The tables had turned completely. Instead of defending myself against their frivolous lawsuit, I was now taking the offensive against people who'd spent months trying to destroy my life and safety. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning, and Emma's appearance shocked everyone in the courtroom. The put-together young woman who'd always prided herself on her appearance looked haggard and desperate. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping. When the judge asked her to respond to the allegations about gambling debts and criminal threats, Emma broke down completely. Her sobbing testimony inadvertently confirmed most of the facts we'd presented, including her debt to dangerous people and her role in providing them with my personal information. My parents' attorney, Richard Polk, realized during the hearing that his clients had lied to him about virtually everything. The evidence David presented about Emma's gambling activities and criminal associations clearly shocked him. When he requested a recess to consult with his clients, I could see him furiously whispering to my parents in the hallway. Their faces went from defiant to terrified as they realized the depth of legal trouble they'd created for themselves by filing false claims in their original lawsuit. By the time court reconvened, Polk was requesting permission to withdraw from the case entirely. The company investigation that had been hanging over my head was finally resolved with a formal apology and a significant promotion. Margaret Winchester called me into her office to personally apologize for the stress the investigation had caused and to offer me the position of senior account director. The promotion came with a $40,000 salary increase, better benefits, and the opportunity to lead major client relationships. The irony was perfect. While my family was trying to destroy my career through false accusations, my actual job performance was being rewarded with advancement and recognition. Success really was the best revenge. Michael chose that week to propose, presenting me with a beautiful vintage engagement ring during a quiet dinner at my house. "I want to build a life with someone who fights for what she believes in," he said. "Someone who doesn't back down when people try to tear her down." His proposal represented everything my family couldn't understand. A partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love rather than obligation and exploitation. When I called to share the engagement news, my parents' response was predictable. They accused Michael of taking advantage of my vulnerable emotional state and suggested that no decent man would want to marry into family drama. Emma's response to my engagement was pure rage disguised as heartbreak. She posted a series of social media updates about sisters who abandon family for money and status, clearly referring to my relationship with Michael. She called my office repeatedly, crying about how I was choosing a stranger over family and begging me to reconsider my selfish decisions. When her emotional manipulation didn't work, she escalated to threats, leaving voicemails about how my engagement was the final betrayal and how I'd pay for choosing outsiders over blood. Each message was documented and added to our growing evidence file for the restraining order. The breakthrough in our case came when Emma was arrested during a raid on the illegal gambling operation. Police had been investigating the criminal network for months, and Emma was caught during a money-counting operation that she'd been recruited to help with. Her arrest provided crucial evidence about the extent of her involvement with dangerous criminals and the reality of her debts. When she called my parents from jail begging for bail money they didn't have, They finally began to understand the magnitude of the problem Emma's choices had created for the entire family. My parents' desperation reached new heights when they attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent, claiming that the stress of the family situation had affected my judgment. They petitioned the court for a psychological evaluation, hoping to prove that my refusal to help Emma was evidence of mental illness. The psychiatrist they requested, Dr. James Peterson, was known for his conservative views about family obligations. However, his evaluation of me was overwhelmingly positive, concluding that my boundary setting and self-protection were signs of mental health rather than illness. His report actually criticized my parents' enabling behavior and recommended family therapy for them. Emma's staged suicide attempt was the most manipulative and terrifying escalation yet. She called 911 reporting that she'd taken pills because her family had abandoned her, then posted dramatic goodbye messages on social media blaming me for her decision to end her life. Emergency responders found her conscious and coherent with an empty bottle of over-the-counter sleep aids beside her. Hardly a serious attempt but effective theater. The incident generated enormous sympathy from extended family members who didn't understand the full context, and Emma milked the attention for weeks, claiming that my cruelty had driven her to desperation. But the social media evidence that Sarah had been collecting was finally starting to work in my favor. Extended family members who'd initially believed Emma's victim narrative began to notice inconsistencies in her various versions of events. Her claims about being homeless didn't match the photos she posted from expensive restaurants and shopping trips. Her assertions about family abandonment were contradicted by documented evidence of the financial support she'd been receiving for years. Slowly but surely, people began to see through the manipulation that had worked so effectively for so long. The moment when everything shifted came during a family barbecue I wasn't invited to, but that was documented extensively on social media. Emma, presumably drunk, went on a rant about how she deserved better treatment because she was the artistic one, and I was just a boring corporate robot. Her words, captured on multiple family members' phones, revealed the entitlement and resentment that had been driving her behavior all along. For the first time, relatives began publicly questioning Emma's version of events and asking why she couldn't simply get a job like everyone else. The tide of family opinion was finally starting to turn. September brought a cascade of devastating revelations that finally exposed the full extent of my parents' financial deception and Emma's dangerous spiral. Their bankruptcy filing, which they'd tried to keep secret, became public record when creditors began seizing assets to recover unpaid debts. The documents revealed that they owed over $300,000 across multiple credit cards, personal loans, and the second mortgage they'd taken on their house. Every penny of that debt could be traced back to Emma's various failed ventures, gambling losses, and expensive lifestyle that they'd been funding for years. Their entire lawsuit against me had been a desperate attempt to avoid losing everything they'd worked for. Emma's gambling debts had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined possible. Police investigators revealed that she now owed over $70,000 to the criminal operation, and her attempts to win back the money had only made her debt larger. She'd been stealing from local businesses where she worked temporary jobs, had forged checks from our parents' account, and had even attempted to use my identity to open credit cards and take out loans. The Emma I'd grown up with had been completely consumed by addiction, and replaced by someone capable of any crime if it might buy her more time or money. When my parents came to my house demanding that I take out a second mortgage to save the family home, the confrontation finally brought everything into the open. They arrived unannounced on a Saturday morning, looking haggard and desperate, with Emma trailing behind them like a scolded child. My father actually had the nerve to suggest that my selfishness was destroying the family, and that I had a moral obligation to sacrifice my financial security to fix the problems Emma had created. When I pointed out that giving them money would only enable Emma's gambling addiction, my mother screamed that I was heartless and obsessed with money. Emma's breakdown during that confrontation was both terrifying and enlightening. She admitted for the first time that she'd been gambling for over 2 years, and that the debts were much larger than she'd told our parents. But instead of accepting responsibility, she blamed me for her addiction, claiming that my success had made her feel worthless and driven her to seek validation through gambling. In Emma's twisted logic, my achievements were somehow responsible for her destructive choices, and my refusal to bail her out was proof that I'd never really loved her. The conversation ended with my parents threatening to disown me if I didn't do the right thing and help save Emma from the consequences of her own actions. My absolute refusal to mortgage my house for Emma's gambling debts created a complete rupture in our family relationships. Within hours of our confrontation, I received texts from relatives who'd been contacted by my parents with yet another version of events. According to their story, I was now a wealthy woman who was cruelly allowing my family to become homeless out of spite. They conveniently omitted Emma's gambling addiction, the criminal threats I'd received, and the years of financial support they'd already provided. The narrative was simple. Successful daughter abandons struggling family in their hour of need. The dangerous escalation came when Emma's gambling contacts decided that patience wasn't profitable. A group of men showed up at my workplace during lunch hour, asking pointed questions about my financial situation, and suggesting that Emma's debts were a family problem that needed a family solution. Building security escorted them out, but their message was clear. They considered me a viable target for recovering Emma's debts through intimidation or violence. The incident was reported to police, but the men had used fake names and disappeared before officers arrived. My car was vandalized 3 times in 2 weeks, with increasingly threatening messages carved into the paint and left on threatening notes. "Pay up or pay the price" was spray-painted across my windshield after someone slashed all 4 tires. A dead fish was left in my mailbox with a note saying, "This could be you." The psychological warfare was working. I was afraid to go to work, afraid to come home, and constantly looking over my shoulder for signs of danger. Emma's choices had turned my life into a nightmare that seemed to have no resolution except giving in to their demands. The breakthrough came when Emma was arrested again, this time for attempting to rob a convenience store to get money for her gambling debts. The security camera footage showed her clearly, and she was caught with stolen cash in her purse. During booking, she broke down and confessed to police about the criminal network she'd been involved with, providing detailed information about their operations in exchange for a plea bargain. Her confession included admitting that she'd given my personal information to dangerous people and had encouraged them to see me as a potential source of debt recovery. Margaret Coleman's documentation of the harassment I'd been receiving became crucial evidence when police finally connected all the threatening incidents to Emma's gambling associates. As a retired judge, Margaret had been carefully photographing license plates, recording times and dates of suspicious activity, and even video recording some of the more blatant intimidation attempts. Her evidence created a clear timeline showing how Emma's gambling debts had evolved into a systematic campaign of harassment against me. The moment of truth came when police raided the gambling operations headquarters and found extensive documentation of their collection activities. Among the files was a folder with my name on it containing my home address, work schedule, car description, and financial information that could only have come from Emma. There were even photos of my house and notes about the best times to approach me for debt collection conversations. Seeing the evidence of how thoroughly Emma had betrayed my safety and privacy was devastating, but it was also liberating. Finally, I had proof of what I'd been claiming all along. Emma wasn't a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in criminal activities that endangered my life. My parents' lawsuit against me collapsed completely when their attorney discovered the extent of their lies and fraud. Richard Polk filed an emergency motion to withdraw from the case, citing ethical concerns about his client's truthfulness. In his withdrawal filing, he indicated that new evidence had revealed material misrepresentations in the original complaint. Without legal representation, and facing potential perjury charges for their false statements, my parents were forced to drop their lawsuit entirely. The victory felt hollow, though, because it came at the cost of losing my family forever. The court proceedings in October felt like watching justice finally catch up with years of manipulation and abuse. Emma pleaded guilty to robbery, fraud, and conspiracy charges related to her gambling activities and criminal associations. The judge, impressed by the thoroughness of the evidence David had presented, sentenced her to 18 months in county jail followed by 2 years of supervised probation and mandatory addiction treatment. Standing in that courtroom watching my sister led away in handcuffs was heartbreaking, but it was also the first time in years that she was facing real consequences for her destructive choices. My countersuit against my parents resulted in a civil judgment that included financial compensation for my legal fees, damages to my property, and emotional distress. The court found that their lawsuit had been filed in bad faith, and that they'd engaged in a pattern of harassment designed to coerce me into giving up my legally owned property. The judge's written opinion was scathing, describing their behavior as an unconscionable attempt to exploit family relationships for financial gain, and noting that their favoritism toward Emma had enabled her criminal behavior. The judgment was for $65,000, though I knew I'd never see most of that money given their bankruptcy status. The criminal investigation into Emma's gambling operation led to arrests throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Emma's cooperation with authorities helped dismantle a network that had been operating illegal gambling, money laundering, and loan sharking operations across the Rocky Mountain region. Her willingness to testify against her former associates was partly genuine remorse and partly self-preservation, but it resulted in significant prison sentences for people who'd been threatening my safety. For the first time in months, I felt safe walking to my car or coming home after dark. My parents' reputation in our community was completely destroyed by the revelations that came out during the court proceedings. Local newspapers covered the story of their fraudulent lawsuit and Emma's criminal activities, and the details were shocking enough to generate significant attention. Neighbors who'd known them for 20 years suddenly understood why their other daughter had been so distant from the family. Church members, friends, and even casual acquaintances began distancing themselves from people who'd been revealed as enablers of criminal behavior and perpetrators of financial fraud. The extended family that had initially supported Emma began reaching out to apologize as the full truth became public. My cousin Maria called in tears, admitting that she'd believed Emma's lies about my selfishness without questioning the story's inconsistencies. My Aunt Patricia, who'd posted those passive-aggressive Facebook updates, sent a long email acknowledging that she'd been manipulated and expressing admiration for my strength in standing up to family pressure. Even my grandmother, who'd been confused by the conflicting narratives, called to say she understood now why I'd had to protect myself from people who were supposed to love me. My career flourished as the legal drama finally ended, and I could focus on work without the constant stress of family harassment. The promotion to senior account director led to opportunities to work with Fortune 500 clients and manage campaigns that were featured in national marketing publications. Preston and Associates offered me a partnership track position, recognizing that my ability to handle pressure and maintain professionalism during personal crisis demonstrated executive-level leadership skills. Success in my career provided both financial security and emotional validation that my choices had been correct. Michael's family embraced me completely once they understood the situation I'd been navigating. His parents, both retired teachers, were horrified by my family's treatment of me and made it clear that I was welcome at every holiday, family dinner, and celebration. His sister Jennifer became a close friend, and his nephews started calling me Aunt Rebecca months before the wedding. For the first time in my life, I experienced what healthy family relationships looked like. People who celebrated each other's successes, offered support during difficulties, and respected individual boundaries without drama or manipulation. The house that had been at the center of so much conflict became a symbol of my independence and strength. Michael and I spent weekends updating and decorating, creating a space that reflected our shared values and future plans. The guest room that I'd originally planned for family visits became Michael's home office. The living room where I'd imagined hosting family gatherings became our entertainment space for friends who'd proven their loyalty during the crisis. Every improvement we made felt like an investment in a life built on choice rather than obligation. Emma's time in jail was apparently transformative, though I remained cautiously skeptical about the permanence of her changes. She participated in addiction treatment programs, earned her GED, and began working with counselors who specialized in gambling disorders. Her letters to me from jail were initially defensive and blame-shifting, but gradually became more introspective and genuinely remorseful. She began acknowledging the harm her choices had caused and accepting responsibility for the consequences she was facing. Whether the change was genuine or another manipulation remained to be seen. My parents faced the complete loss of their home, their savings, and their reputation in the community. They were forced to declare bankruptcy and move to a small apartment across town, starting over financially. The wedding planning process became a celebration of everything I'd fought to protect and build. Michael and I decided to have the ceremony in our backyard, the same space that had been vandalized and threatened, but was now transformed into a garden paradise. Margaret Coleman officiated the ceremony, using her authority as a retired judge to marry us in the place where I'd learned to stand up for myself. The guest list included chosen family members who'd proven their loyalty. Work colleagues, Michael's relatives, neighbors who'd supported me, and Jennifer Walsh, who'd become one of my closest friends through the legal battle. Emma's request to attend the wedding from jail was denied, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity for my peace of mind. She'd written a long letter apologizing for her behavior and expressing genuine remorse for the harm she'd caused. But the wounds were still too fresh for me to risk my wedding day becoming another drama-filled confrontation. Michael supported my decision completely, understanding that forgiveness didn't require forgetting boundaries or exposing myself to potential manipulation on what should be the happiest day of my life. My parents' absence from the wedding was painful but expected. They'd made no effort to apologize for their behavior or acknowledge the harm they'd caused, instead maintaining that I'd abandoned family loyalty for material possessions. Their version of events never changed. Emma was the victim, I was the selfish daughter, and their lawsuit had been justified by family obligations that superseded individual rights. Without acknowledgement of wrongdoing or acceptance of reality, reconciliation was impossible, and I'd learned to accept that some relationships can't be repaired. The house that had been at the center of so much conflict became our sanctuary and symbol of triumph over adversity. Michael's construction skills helped us transform every room into something better than I'd originally imagined. The kitchen became the heart of our home, where we hosted dinner parties for friends who appreciated good food and honest conversation. The living room with its working fireplace became our winter retreat, perfect for quiet evenings and intimate conversations. The master bedroom became our private refuge, where we planned our future and recovered from the challenges of building a life together. Career advancement accelerated once I was free from the constant stress and distraction of family legal battles. The partnership track position at Preston & Associates led to managing major accounts and developing innovative marketing strategies that were implemented nationally. My success became a source of personal pride rather than family obligation, and the financial rewards allowed Michael and me to travel, invest in our future, and support causes we cared about without guilt or external pressure. Emma's release from jail after serving 14 months brought unexpected opportunities for genuine reconciliation. Her addiction treatment had been successful, and her counseling had helped her understand the psychological patterns that had led to her destructive behavior. She developed insight into how our parents' favoritism had damaged both of us, creating entitlement in her and resentment in me. Her first phone call after release was humble and respectful, asking for permission to begin rebuilding trust rather than demanding immediate forgiveness. The process of rebuilding a relationship with Emma was slow and careful, mediated by family therapists and bounded by strict conditions. She had to maintain sobriety, hold steady employment, and attend regular counseling sessions while living in a halfway house designed for people recovering from addiction. Our first meeting in 2 years was awkward and emotional, but it was also honest in ways our relationship had never been before. Emma acknowledged that her jealousy and entitlement had driven her to hurt the sister who'd actually tried to protect her, and I began to understand how our parents' favoritism had damaged her ability to develop genuine self-worth. My parents' gradual recognition of their mistakes came slowly and partially, beginning with my father's heart attack that forced them to confront their mortality and isolation. Their financial ruin had taught them harsh lessons about enabling versus helping, and Emma's criminal behavior had shown them the consequences of refusing to set boundaries. Their attempts at reconciliation were tentative and conditional, still focused more on their needs than on acknowledgement of harm they'd caused. Progress was limited, but the conversations were more honest than any we'd had during my childhood. The mentorship program I developed at work for young women facing family pressure became one of my most meaningful professional accomplishments. Many successful women had stories of family members who tried to claim credit for achievements they'd undermined, and my experience resonated with employees who were struggling to maintain professional success while managing personal drama. The program provided practical advice about legal protection, emotional boundaries, and financial independence that helped other women avoid the mistakes I'd made in trying to please people who didn't have my best interests at heart. Financial independence became the foundation for every other aspect of my freedom and happiness. The house I'd fought to keep appreciated significantly in value, providing equity for future investments. My career advancement created multiple income streams and retirement security that no one could threaten or claim ownership of. Michael and I built a life based on shared goals and mutual support rather than financial dependence or obligation, proving that healthy relationships enhanced rather than threatened individual success. The therapy that had been court-ordered during the legal proceedings became a voluntary investment in understanding family dynamics and breaking generational patterns. Dr. Rodriguez helped me process the grief of losing my family of origin, while celebrating the strength I'd shown in protecting my future. Understanding the psychology behind my parents' favoritism and Emma's entitlement helped me forgive without forgetting, maintain compassion without sacrificing boundaries, and build relationships based on choice rather than guilt. The community that formed around our house included neighbors like Margaret Coleman, work friends like Jennifer Walsh, Michael's extended family, and new friends we'd met through shared interests and values. Sunday dinners became celebrations of friendship and chosen family, rather than obligations to people who drained my energy. Holidays became joyful gatherings with people who respected each other's boundaries and celebrated each other's successes without jealousy or manipulation. The final legal resolution came when my parents' bankruptcy was complete and Emma's probation ended successfully. All criminal charges had been resolved, civil judgments had been settled or discharged, and restraining orders had expired without incident. The official end of legal proceedings felt anticlimactic after years of court battles, but it represented closure and the beginning of a completely new chapter in all our lives. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that fighting for my house had really been fighting for my right to exist as an independent adult with my own goals and boundaries. The legal battle had forced everyone in my family to confront truths they'd been avoiding for years. Emma's addiction and entitlement, my parents' favoritism and enabling, and my own strength and determination to build a life based on my values rather than their expectations. The conflict had been devastating, but it had also been necessary for breaking patterns that would have continued destroying all of us for years to come. The house I'd almost lost became the foundation for everything I'd built since. A marriage based on mutual respect, a career built on merit and hard work, friendships chosen for compatibility and loyalty, and a sense of self-worth that no one could threaten or diminish. The Victorian cottage with its wraparound porch and original hardwood floors had been worth fighting for, not because of its market value but because of what it represented. The right to keep what you've earned, the importance of protecting what you've built, and the courage to stand alone when standing together means sacrificing your integrity. The greatest lesson learned was that family loyalty shouldn't require financial sacrifice, career limitation, or personal diminishment. True family members celebrate your success rather than resenting it, support your goals rather than undermining them, and respect your boundaries rather than violating them. The family that mattered most was the one I'd chosen and built through marriage, friendship, and shared values rather than the one I'd been assigned through biology and obligation. What started as a simple desire to buy my first house had become a journey of self-discovery, legal education, and personal transformation that taught me everything I needed to know about standing up for myself and building a life worth protecting. The woman who signed those mortgage papers had been naive about family dynamics and conflict resolution, but the woman who emerged from the legal battle was equipped with knowledge, experience, and boundaries that would protect her for the rest of her life. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about how you handled family members who tried to claim ownership over your success or demanded sacrifices that weren't fair or reasonable. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button to let me know I'm not alone in facing these difficult family dynamics. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself when the people closest to you become the biggest threats to your happiness and security. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with family pressure to give up things they've worked hard to achieve. Thank you so much for listening to my story and for all the support you've shown in the comments. I hope that sharing my experience helps someone else find the courage to protect what they've built, even when family members make that protection feel like betrayal. Remember, you don't owe anyone your success just because they're related to you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their destructive choices. Wishing you all the strength to build lives that reflect your values and the wisdom to protect what truly matters, even when protection requires difficult choices that others won't understand.